out of month underscore name. Still might not work. All right, it doesn't work. So it means we cannot extract month name. So what we want to do is to use something like format that we use in Power BI or text that we use in Excel. So what they do is that they convert the data type to a new data type. Okay, so your format or your text converts from dates or from one data type to text data type. So that's the reason why we're able to use text on a date to get the month name or the day name. And we're able to use format on the date to get a month name or the day name in Power BI. Okay, so here to do something similar, I would say to underscore char, char. Okay, open brackets. Can I remember this? I think it's like Excel as well. You reference your column, payments underscore date, and then in single quote. Let me see. Although not sure of this. Okay. Okay. Let me see. Months. Beautiful. Can you see that now? Who is the person writing on my screen? So do you see that now? So with this now, I'm able to extract the month name. Do you see that? I'm able to extract the month name. So I can give a condition that, okay, where this is equal to April. And then if I run it, okay, no query returned. Let me see. It's meant to return for February. If it does not return for February, then I probably have to give an alias. It didn't return for February as well. Why is it not returning for February? Okay, let's give an alias as month name. Okay, so where month name is equals to February. Alright, doesn't exist because it won't run or it won't change the column name until everything is run. Alright, so there's an easy way to bypass this. I would simply say where extract funds from payment dates is equal to so. If I run this, beautiful. So it returns only February. Nice. And I have 2016 data. So if I say, okay, where payments or where demands is equals to P, and I run it, returns only March. Beautiful. Returns only March. Nice. So so you can use to character get the day name as well if you want. So those are just date functions. They can be kind of tricky to make use of in SQL, but over time, practice, you can see because I don't really work with data on SQL that much. I don't even really work with SQL that much. So some of these functions are kind of old in my head, but once you try the first time, try the second time, and you're able to read the error that is giving you, and with experience, you can easily debug where the issue is coming from. Okay, but for you, just constant practice over time, you'll get used to it. But the truth is that if you don't really have a let's say job that requires some of these things, you might forget most of them. Okay, but if you forget, there's no problem, but you've been taught once before, so the concept remains in your head. So wherever it is that you do, let's say maybe in research or education, you'll find it easier to comprehend or assimilate, understand quickly what is being said, rather than if you don't even have any idea of it at all. All right. So let's move on to what we really have for today, which is the group by. It's not much. It's just think of group by as your pivot tables. Pivot tables in Excel. What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to I'm going to um, let me open a particular Excel sheet. Because I want you to understand what is happening. Okay? So now, if you want to analyze a large set of data effectively in Excel, you make use of pivot tables, isn't it? Okay? You make use of pivot tables where you have your fields that you can select, drag them to maybe columns or rows or filters or values, in order to effectively analyze your data. The same thing happens in Power BI. Power BI, your table is already kind of pivoted, like on your what is it called? Report. You have your fields showing like this as well. Show you the name of the columns that you have, isn't it? So that you can easily analyze. All right. But I want you to see the relationship here. I want you to see what is really happening, what is going on behind the scenes. Okay? It's very simple. Now, if I ask you, say, what is the sum of sales by let's say store location, or we don't have sales column, no problem. Let's say what is the sum of unit price by store location. Now, on your main table, okay, if you would see that your store location, you have repetitions. Lower Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, Lower Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen. Until you go, I think there's Astoria as well, somewhere there. I've not even seen any. Astoria. Can you see Astoria? Okay. Now, we want to get the sum of sales for each one of these stores. Okay. For each one of these stores, you want to get the sum of sales. It's very easy. You need to first know that there's a function called sum, isn't it? You can easily sum the unit price column. Okay, let's say sum of unit price. You can easily sum the unit price column using the sum function. You say equals to sum, and then you put in this range, unit price, isn't it? That will give you one figure. Now, in SQL, if you want to do something similar, say for instance now, let's look at the okay, we're dealing with payments. Payment is where we have the amount. So on the payments table now, okay, we have the amount. So if I want to get the sum of amounts paid so far, the sum of amounts paid, what I will do is I will say select sum amounts, which is the name of the column, amount. So if I run this, it gives me the value 61,312.04. That is the summation of amounts. Okay, so that is the total revenue generated. You can see we're already beginning to ask questions now. If they ask you what is the revenue generated, you can see how we answered it. If they ask you what is the total revenue generated for a particular month, you will now begin to add conditions to it. Can you see? So you can see where your analysis comes in SQL now. So that's why you need to know these aggregation functions. If it is average, you want to calculate, in Excel you use equals to average, isn't it? Open brackets, then you give your range, you press enter, and then it will give you average, isn't it? In SQL, also similar. You say select amount column. So you say amount. From which table? From payments. When you run it, so what is the average amount? No function matches. Oh my god. PostgreSQL, AVG. AVG, not average. Ah, God. When you have so many functions in your head, this is what happens. So, average amount. Okay, so AVG amount. All right. Now, this is giving us average in, you can see how long it is. 4.2006, blah, 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 blah. So, if you want to round this up, as Excel has a round function, you also have a round function here. I will say round, open brackets, the average amount, comma, and then to how many decimal places? Let's say to 2 decimal places, close the brackets. When I run this, you can see that although the round did not get painted, that is some of the functions that are not, I don't know what we call them, I can't remember. Okay, but they work, but they don't get colored. Okay, another example of such function is, I think, the concatenate function in SQL. Okay, it will work, but it won't get colored. So you can see we were able to round it up to 2 decimal places. If I want to round it up to, say, 4 decimal places, I'll change this 2 to 4. I'll run it. And you can see that. Okay, so now, yes, we can get the total revenue. We can get the average payments made per order. But the real question begins to come when we want to see how the customers are performing against. Who is our best customer in terms of revenue? Who is the best staff ID? Or who is the best staff? Who is the which branch is the best branch? Things like that. Those are the kind of analysis you really do in Excel, in Power BI, isn't it? Can you do them in SQL? Yes. So this is where the group by statement comes in. Now remember, if I ask you a question, let's say I have an Excel data like that, and I ask you a question and I say, what is the sum of sales by the store location? Or what is the sum of unit price by store location? Now, on your pivot table, what you will first do is to group the store location. Remember, your store location is repeated. You have different records over time, isn't it? But on my pivot table, if I drag store location to rows, you see that it just gives me the 3 stores I have. All the repetitions have been grouped. So it's ready for me to calculate maybe how many times they appear, or the sum of unit price, or the sum of sales, or the sum of anything. For each group, now this is a group. The Astoria group contains all the records of Astoria. That's why if I double click on this Astoria, it says choose the field containing the detail you want to show. Let's say unit price. For Astoria, it can bring out different unit price. This is only for Astoria, okay? But this is not even what I wanted to show. Okay. The way I have Astoria groups like this, all right, is the first step. All right. Then I can now calculate sum of unit price. Isn't it? So if I click on, let me see, I click on sum of unit price, beautiful. It opens a data for me. And this data I have here contains details of only Astoria. Because I clicked on the sum of unit price for Astoria alone. So this is a group. This is a group. This is a group. This is a group. Okay? So also here, it is the same way. If you want to calculate maybe what is the sum of amount by, let's go back, select asterisk from payments. If the question is what is the sum of amounts by customer ID, okay, sum of amounts by customer ID. Now, those are two columns mentioned, okay, two columns, customer ID and amount. Now, if it was in Excel, you will drag customer ID to rows, isn't it? Or product ID or store ID to rows. That is the one that is going to be grouped. Remember, let me drag this out. If I drag product ID to rows or store ID to rows, I have store ID 358. Those are groups. So this is group of store ID 3, group of store ID 5, group of store ID 8. Okay, so it is the categorical variable you are grouping. So also here, you are going to be grouping the customer ID. So if I say sales by customer ID, it is the customer ID you will group. If I say sales by staff ID, it is the staff ID you will group. If I say sales by rental ID, it is the rental ID you will group. So if I want to answer that question, what is the sum of amounts by customer ID? I will start by grouping the customer ID. So I will start by selecting customer ID, from payment. And I will now tell it that, okay, that customer ID you selected, you know that here, what you first do is you will click and drag. That clicking and dragging is you have selected it. So if you drop it in the rows, you are telling Excel or the pivot table to group it. It has grouped it. That is why it appears like this. Okay? So also we select the customer ID first, and then we tell it from payments. Okay? We now tell it to group by that same column, customer ID. So if I run this now, remember I have 14,596 records. Okay? This customer ID is repeated because it's a payment table, so they can pay multiple times. But if I want to group them, they should just appear once each. So if I execute, you see that it drops to 599 IDs. So because of this grouping, I can now calculate a particular value for each customer ID. For instance, I can sum the amount column. So if I want to get the sum of the amount column now, I will now go back to my select clause, my select statement. I'll put comma, and then I will get the amount column. But I will not just get the amount column. I need to do something on the amount column, which is what? If this was in Excel, what will it do? It will sum it, isn't it? So I'll come here and I will enter sum and put the amount in brackets. So when I run this now, you see that for each customer ID, I have the total amount that is paid to our company or to our rental store. So this is the concept of group buy. Do you see that? So you can group by. Now, this might not be quite insightful, isn't it? I mean, sum of amount by customer ID. Yes, I can use this to say, okay, which customer ID is the best? Which of our customers, which customer is the best? Or the top 10 best customers? Okay, very easy. I can do that. But if I want to get their name, okay, their name is on the customer table. So I will now begin to do some joins. I will have to join to that table in order to get the name. Okay, how can you now define group by? I think I've already defined it already. What other definition again do you want? So it's a function that groups a categorical variable, okay, or groups the categories in a variable, all right, in order to perform a specific calculation related to it. Right? So I can see that, okay, customer ID 184, the total amount spent is $80. All right. So I can order by sum of amounts. If I run this, so it will start from the smallest. If I put DESC at the back, do you see that? So if I ask a question, who is our best customer in terms of sales? You can see the best customer already. Customer ID 148. Do you see that? So I can go further and ask you, okay, what is the name of customer ID 148? Or what is his email address so that we can send him a thank you note? So you might now need to do some joining. Okay, we'll see that in the next class. Don't let me dive into that yet. All right. So if I want to see, okay, still on the what's it called now? Payment table. Still on the payment table. What if I want to get the total amount by the staff ID? Let's see which staff ID performs better. Okay, which staff ID performs better? And then we can also count how many times a staff ID has processed a transaction. Okay, so those are two things now. All right, and this will lead us to the aliases as well. Let me see what I have in my syllabus. Teaching groups with having. Okay. Now, let us see the sum of amounts by the columns. Okay, say sum of amounts by staff ID. What will I do? Select staff ID, sum of the amounts column from payments, and I'll tell it to group by staff ID. So it is the staff ID that is going to group, and then it will sum the amounts for each staff ID. So if I run it, I have just two staff IDs, staff ID 1 and staff ID 2. And from this, I can see that staff ID 2 outshines staff ID 1. isn't it? So not only the sum can I get. Now, let me introduce us to aliases. So aliases allows us to specify the name of the column. Okay, let's say we want to change the name of the column, or we want to give our column a particular name when running a query. The column name will not change in the table, okay? But when it is outputting it will just change the column name. For instance, now this sum amount, by default, the column name is sum. But if I say as what, and then I put double quotes for column name, double quotes, and I say total sales. Because of space, I'm putting it in double quotes. If I put underscore between them, it will act like one word, and I don't need the double quotes. I've already explained this to us in the first class. If I run this, you see this, staff ID, total sales. So if I want to get the number of transactions they've processed as well, after this, I'll put comma. Now, number of transactions will be what? Will be the count of records or count of any column. How many times can you see the staff ID? So I'll tell it to count the staff ID as well. Count staff underscore ID as transaction processed. Transactions processed. So highlight and run. Do you see that? Okay. So this one has processed 7,304 transactions. This has processed 7,292 transactions. The difference in the transactions processed is not that much, just about 12 transactions. And it's resulting to how much? Close to $800 and something dollars. $800 and something dollars difference. Do you see that? Wow. Okay, so what of their average transaction? Average transaction. So let me move this to a new line. I can move it to a new line. Okay. So select sum amount as total sales, count of staff ID as this, and then I can tell it to get the average transaction as well. So average AVG. So average sales rather. So I'll say amount. So average of amounts as average sales. So per transaction, the average sale will tell you, okay, so per transaction, this is how much they make. So if I run this, error, I didn't put comma here. Do you see that? You see, do you see what happened now? It just said syntax error at or near AVG. At or near AVG. There's nothing here. I come here. And the only thing I noticed is I didn't put comma. You can see it was not specific. It just told me syntax error. That syntax error can be very, very ambiguous. It could mean anything. If I run this now, because of that comma, you see that it changed. Do you see that? So now this is your analysis. So that analysis you would have done in Excel is what you're now doing in SQL already. The only difference there is that in Excel, you can now insert pivot chart or whatever. But here in your SQL, you are not doing any visualization. Okay, so unless they request for a dashboard or visuals to see, if the person that is asking the question just says, okay, just help us query this data to get this information, you don't need any visualization. This is how you make use of SQL to query the data. So you can see how we are able to get the sum of sales, the total sales, the number of transactions they've processed, and their average sales. You see how we're able to get that easily. So you can see that the statement, the query is now becoming more interesting. Do you see that? Okay. So I would advise you very much, I would advise you very much to not miss that Power BI project. Submit the project. Okay? Your SQL project is not hard. Okay? It's not hard at all. It is very direct. All right, but because over time people would have given up in the Excel aspect, would have given up in the Power BI aspect. Once you have given up there, you won't even be able to go to SQL. So that's why they usually drop off in SQL. But if you're able to submit your Power BI, don't worry, the SQL project is not hard at all. Then you might have a final capstone project, okay, depending on how I see what you do on the Power BI project. So if I see that, yes, you guys really did well on the Power BI project, then there might not be a final capstone project. So I'll just require the video testimonials. So for as many as submit that, as I said, I already created, list of resources, videos, links to YouTube videos, YouTube channels that can help, links to sites where you can get data to practice, links to sites for jobs, remote jobs, freelancing, links to sites where you can revamp your resume, and much more. Okay, so I'm still compiling them, but I gave out the link today to some of my students. Okay, so it is how much you show passion. Okay, and I can only determine that when I get to the end of this program. Okay, so after next class, which is on Wednesday, Wednesday is our 23rd class, isn't it? So at the end of that class, I'm going to share with us like a brief information, like a document share, containing how the video testimonial is meant to go. Okay, and I expect that OKS would send them as soon as possible. All right. So I digress. Let's do one more before we move into our attendance. All right. So let's look at this time around the rental table. I said rental, the film table. Again, select from film. So if I want to see the total runtime for all the movies by rating, okay, if I want to see the total runtime for all the movies by rating, all right, so for each rating, what is the total runtime of movies that we have? Meaning I want to sum the length column and group by the rating column. That's simply what it means. So to write that query, select rating, length, or rather sum length, right? And then from film, group by rating. And then if I run this, do you see that? So this is the total time in minutes. Okay. But I want to say, okay, let's say as total run time. Okay. What if I want to get the average run time? So for a PG movie, what is the average run time? For a R-rated movie, what is the average run time? So I would say AVG length column, because it's the length column that tells me the run time as average run time. So if I run this, do you see that? Right? So I can get the maximum runtime as well. So what is the maximum runtime? max of length will give me the maximum runtime. So there's a movie that is 185 minutes that is PG-13. There's a movie that is 185 minutes that is G. So 184 minutes NC-17. Okay, you can get the minimum runtime as well. In length. And this is the minimum runtime. Okay, so practice with the do-by statements. In the next class, we'll start off with including conditions. Okay, because whenever you group by, aside the initial column or set of initial columns, any column that you use aggregation on, sum, average, max, mean, any column you use aggregation on, if you want to apply a condition on it, you have to do it in the having clause. For instance, let's look at this query again. Let me just show us a tip. Okay. Or let me see this one. Okay, so customers and their transaction, their what's it called, total sales or revenue gotten from them. Now, just a tip. If I want to see, okay, customers that have in total, they've given us less than 50 or less than $100. So if I run this now, this will give us all the customers, okay? Now, less than $100 in total. So I'm going to be applying a condition on this sum amount. Now, because I'm applying a condition on an aggregation, I cannot use where clause for it. If I want to apply condition on customer ID, I will use where clause. I'll say where, after this from payment, I'll say where customer ID is this or that. But because I want to apply condition on an aggregation, I will use having, and the having usually comes after the do-by statement. So I will say having some amount less than $100. So if I run this, you see that all the values there are less than $100. Okay, so because it's an aggregation, I cannot use it in the where clause. Only the having clause would calculate that. All right, so we'll explore this further in the next class. But make sure you practice what was done in class. Make sure to explore the data set and see what else you can practice. Because in the next class, as we have been doing, we'll start off with some questions as well. So after the having, we'll move on to joins and then wrap up our SQL. Okay, so do we have any questions? Do we have any questions? There are some people in this class that since the very first day, they've never missed any class. Since the very first day, they have never missed any class. Those kind of people, they deserve special, what's it called, award. Especially if I cross-check it with your, what's it called? If I cross-check it with your assignments and let's say your projects, if they're outstanding as well, no, then you deserve an award. Probably a, what's it called, recommendation on your certificate as well. But let's see. I would discuss that with what's it called, with the team and the management, and to see if they would work on that. So fill your attendance. Fill your attendance. Don't worry, we might consider if you did not miss more than maybe 3 classes, we might consider. But let's see. We don't know what the what's it called, agreement might be yet. Huh? I'm meant to give SQL assignment though. I meant to give one SQL assignment. I just remembered. Okay, I think I'll communicate that across. So please, let's fill our attendance. Let's fill the attendance. If you're unable to fill the attendance, you can drop your I filled for you, Emperor. I filled for you, T Rio. Insini Intofon. I filled for you as well. Joy Adibola, sorry about that. Just make sure you watch the videos on time. Just make sure you watch the videos on time. So I hope everyone has filled attendance. All right, so I think that's all. Make sure you practice. Make sure you practice. I want to see those people that are. There are some people that are in class, but they are not in class. Only their names are there. They are just showing on the participants list, but they are not in class.